Hi, everyone. This is Pennsylvania attorney Evan Gutman here with video number 26 of my legal video education series based upon my book, State Bar Admissions and the Bootlegger's Son. The book is available on both of my websites, which are gutmanvaluations.com and heavensadmissions.com. Both websites also contain two other books I wrote, one of which is a supplement to State Bar Admissions and the Bootlegger's Son, and the other of which is a fictional novel, kind of comical, fun novel, titled Heaven's Admissions Process, which compares the criteria to be admitted into heaven with the criteria to obtain a law license on earth. It's a fun book. Each video also comes with a PDF, and I would encourage you to read the PDF, which is available by clicking on the link on both of my Facebook pages. My two Facebook pages are my personal page, and then I have a second Facebook page, which is titled the Judicial Constructive Criticism Network. And I also have a YouTube page, which contains the videos and is also titled the same as Judicial Constructive Criticism Network. So today's video is titled When a Conviction Carries No Shame. What does that mean, when a conviction carries no shame? Well, the comedian Steve Martin, one of my favorite comedians ever, he used to have a joke where he'd say that inflation is a good thing. Economic inflation, he would say, is a good thing. And the reason he would say that is because he asserted that if we had lots and lots of inflation, then everybody would be a millionaire. Of course, that misses one key point, which is that if everybody's a millionaire due to there being lots and lots of inflation, then nobody would really have any more buying power, because the buying power of a dollar would be so severely diminished. So similarly, my perspective is that if everyone on earth, if everyone in a country has a criminal conviction, then it's not that really bad to have a criminal conviction, because you're just like everybody else. The concept of having a criminal conviction is that you're supposed to be viewed as a worse individual than somebody else, whereas the average citizen without a conviction is supposed to be treated with respect and dignity. But if everybody's got a criminal conviction, it don't matter. So here we go with some studies that have been published. In the year 2010, a very, very prominent study regarding criminal convictions was published. It's titled The Growth, Scope, and Spatial Distribution of People with Felony Records in the United States, years 1948 to 2010. It was written by a woman named Sarah Shannon, also co-authored by Christopher Ugan, Jason Schnitker, Melissa Thompson, Sarah Wakefield, and Michael Masoglia. This is probably the premier study still in existence today, because I'm not aware that it's been updated since 2010. The study indicates that as of the year 2010, 1 out of 3 adult male African Americans had a criminal conviction of some sort. That includes both people in prison and out of prison who have served their sentences. Think of that. 1 out of 3 adult African American males have a criminal conviction as of the year 2010. If anything, I think it's probably a higher percentage today, which is really quite frightening. In the year 1980, 30 years beforehand, it was 1 in 8. So in 1980, 1 in 8 adult male African Americans had a criminal conviction. By 2010, 30 years later, it was 1 in 3. That's really quite incredible. Notably, I think this is the only study that really cites that type of statistic. The U.S. Department of Justice does maintain extensive statistics regarding the total number of people arrested, the total number of people in prison, and also includes the number of African Americans of the total number arrested and the number of African Americans of the total in prison. But that basically does not capture the number of Black Americans who have served their sentence already and are out of jail. I don't know of any other study that gives the percentage of all African American adult males who have some type of criminal conviction and what percentage that is. And like I say, in 2010, it was 1 out of 3. So that means, in my view, if you're an African American male, how do you view a criminal conviction? Basically, it means there's a quite high probability you're a felon. And that basically means if one African American male is speaking to another African American male, in their own mind, they would have to say, well, if you have a criminal conviction, you know what that means? It means maybe you committed a crime, maybe you didn't. It's not indicative that you definitely committed a crime because 1 out of 3 have them. So the problem is we're criminalizing so many activities that the average everyday person views as somewhat acceptable. But let's skip the issue of African American adult males. Let's look at total number of people in prison, no matter what their race. This statistic is found in what is known as the World Prison Brief. It's an online database that is available for free to anybody. It's on the website www.prisonstudies.org. That's www.prisonstudies.org. And according to that database, which is the premier database to the best of my knowledge in the world, and pretty much all countries rely upon it, according to that study, the United States has more people incarcerated than any other country. We have, according to that study, approximately 1.8 million people in prison. That's out of a total population of about 340 million. 1.8 million in prison. The country with the next highest number of people incarcerated is China, which only has 1.7 million. So the United States has 1.8 million, China has 1.7 million, but China's population, their total population, is approximately 1.4 billion compared to 340 million in the United States. So therefore, China's rate of incarceration is immensely lower than the United States. Russia, we tend to believe Russia is not a fair country, so to speak. Russia has only 433,000 people incarcerated. Iran has only 189,000 people imprisoned. And what's also interesting about this is if you look at the incarceration rate, because those are totals, so you've got to really correlate it to the rate for it to be a more meaningful number. The U.S. incarceration rate, with its 1.8 million people out of 340 million total population, is approximately 542 people per 100,000 people. 542 incarcerated per 100,000 citizens. That places the U.S. 5th on the list in comparison to other countries when you look at the rate. China's rate, based upon 1.7 million people incarcerated compared to their 1.4 billion population, China's rate is 133rd on the list. The United States is 5th. China's rate is 133rd. And that basically places them at 119 people incarcerated out of every 100,000. Russia's rate is 45% less than the United States at 300 people per 100,000, and it is 35th on the list. Iran's rate based upon their 189,000 total incarcerated, is 228 people per 100,000, which is less than half of the United States, of the rate of the United States. Interestingly, the number one highest rate worldwide is El Salvador. El Salvador has a rate of 1,659 people incarcerated per 100,000 individuals. And by the way, the PDF associated with this video contains attachments that show these tables, both in bar chart form and in statistical form, listing the numbers. And it's quite an incredible thing to look at. So what does this all mean? I mentioned earlier that there's too many things that are crimes in the United States. You know, when I was 19 years old, I was drinking alcohol regularly, and it was totally legal. Because the drinking age when I was 19, I'm 65 now, the drinking age when I was 19 was only 18. So it was totally legal to drink alcohol. But today, the drinking age is 21, which means a 20-year-old can come out with a criminal conviction that may dog them for the rest of their life if they simply drink alcohol, when an activity that was totally legal 40 years ago or 30 years ago is a crime in today's world. Something's wrong there. Our legislators are enacting too many laws on issues that are not particularly serious, in my view. I guess other people believe they are very serious. The launching of these, in my view, frivolous prosecutions is then coupled with a failure of defense counsel to provide adequate representation, which then results in the individual having a criminal conviction that may dog them for the rest of their life. Legislators are not particularly bright individuals. They rarely consider whether a proposed law will satisfy constitutional scrutiny, opting instead to go for the premise, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll roll the dice and we'll see, and we'll ultimately let it be tested in court if there's even a defense attorney who is passionate enough and cares enough to launch a challenge to the law itself. Let's consider the following. Let's consider the following hypothetical. This is a total hypothetical. It does not exist, thank gosh. Let's consider a hypothetical state. We'll call this hypothetical state, we'll call it Florida. We'll call this hypothetical state Florida. So let's say in this hypothetical state, every activity a person engages in, whether good or bad, every single activity, even good activities, is considered a crime. In other words, you wash your dishes, that's a crime. You walk your dog, that's a crime. You buy your mother a birthday present, that's a crime. And then, of course, you have other things similar, like basically robbery, theft, assault. Those are also obviously considered crimes. So now every single activity, good or bad, is considered a crime. What happens in that situation? One of two things happens. One, going back to our original premise, it would mean that every single person is a criminal, because every single person is doing something. So everybody's a criminal, but it doesn't matter if you're a criminal, because nobody knows what the good stuff you did is, nobody knows what the bad stuff is, and everybody could just get together and joke around a lot. Hey, what crime did you commit? I committed the crime of buying my mother a birthday present. Oh, what crime did you commit? Well, I committed the crime of theft or robbery. So in that situation, by virtue of the fact that we've equated something good with something bad, and all the people know is whether you have a criminal conviction or not, you've diminished the importance of the criminal conviction. And when the importance of all criminal convictions is diminished by virtue of the fact that they're mixed in with innocent activities, the convictions carry no shame, because everybody's got them. So the more laws you have, the more criminals you have, and the less shameful it is to have a criminal conviction. The judiciary is by no means, so that's the first possibility, that everybody has a criminal conviction. I'm sorry, I need to back up here a little bit. The second possibility is that the judiciary, through no fault of its own, would be placed in a position where it has to decide which laws are constitutional and which are not constitutional. Thus, the legislators would have ceded over, they would have turned over all their power to the judiciary by virtue of the fact that they over-legislated. So the more statutes that legislators enact, the more they diminish their own power and turn it over to the judiciary, which then has full power to determine which laws are constitutionally valid and which laws are constitutionally invalid. Now, the judiciary overall is not absolved of guilt by this entirely at all. And the reason is the judiciary also enacts rules and policies and doctrines that are quite inimical to determining whether a person is innocent or guilty of doing something wrong. One of the top comments, or one of the top criteria, is that quite often state bars will often impose discipline on attorneys for engaging in conduct which they call, quote, prejudicial to the administration of justice, unquote. But what does that mean, prejudicial to the administration of justice? Well, first of all, everybody has a different idea of what justice is. The concept of what justice constituted in Nazi Germany is quite different than what we'd like to think the concept of justice is in the United States today. The labeling of unethical conduct as simply being conduct that is prejudicial to the administration of justice is a really vague, ambiguous, and largely meaningless term. Here's one of my favorite U.S. Supreme Court quotes. It's a well-known premise in law that the violation of an unconstitutional statute is not an illegal act. If the law is constitutionally invalid, you can violate the invalid law. That's a basic premise that no one really disputes. Former U.S. Supreme Court Justices William O. Douglas, Earl Warren, William Brennan, and Abe Fortas of the U.S. Supreme Court once emphasized that citizens actually not only are not guilty if they violate an unconstitutional law, but they go even further. And they go further in a dissenting opinion. They go even further by indicating that citizens have a civic duty. They say citizens have a civic responsibility to violate unconstitutional laws. The concept being you need to violate these unconstitutional laws to get them off the books. And more specifically, this was in the case of Walker versus City of Birmingham, 1967 case. 4 U.S. Supreme Court justices dissenting wrote as follows. The right to defy an unconstitutional statute is basic. A court does not have jurisdiction to do what a city or other agency of a state lacks jurisdiction to do. An ordinance unconstitutional on its face is not made sacred by an unconstitutional injunction that enforces it. It can and should be flouted in the manner of the ordinance itself. Courts, as well as citizens, are not free to ignore all the procedures of the law. The constitutional freedom of which the court speaks can be won only if judges honor the Constitution. That's 4 U.S. Supreme Court justices dissenting and carrying the concept that it's not illegal to violate an unconstitutional law, carrying it even further by first indicating that citizens have a duty and a civic responsibility to violate unconstitutional laws, and also asserting that an unconstitutional law does not become constitutional if it is upheld by an unconstitutional court injunction. The concept being that according to these 4 U.S. Supreme Court justices, you can violate a court order if the court order itself is unconstitutional. Now, it is a dissenting opinion, keep in mind with respect to the last premise there, because that's a somewhat of a disputed issue, and it's a controversial issue. I agree with their opinion that an unconstitutional court order does not need to be complied with. If it's an illegal, unconstitutional order, you should have a right to disobey it. But like I said, that's a dissenting opinion. So anyway, I suggest legislators be a little more careful about the laws that they enact, because the bottom line is there's a lot of laws out there today, a lot of laws that are ripe for, quote, flouting. And as far as a nice closing here, with respect to the prison statistics, the United States has more people in prison than any other country. And if you have more people in prison than any other country, it's kind of tough to say you're the land of the free. I mean, this isn't rocket science here, whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. If you got more people in prison than any other country, you're not the land of the free. You're the land of the incarcerated. So next July 4th, when you're singing the Star Spangled Banner, maybe change the last line, last verse or two. And it should go, and the land of the incarcerated in the home of who knows what. Anyway, hope you found today interesting. Actually, one of the most important videos that I think I've presented. And we'll see you in the next day, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And remember, love right, don't fight. Bye, everybody.